Well, as we get into the summer months, it is time now for our July Farmer Roundtable. And joining us as we talk about a number of different topics, ranging from the Farm Bill to climate smart ag to how weather conditions are on their operations and much more. We welcome into our Farmer Roundtable Jason Russell from Monticello, Iowa, and Cavin Steiger from Forsyth, Montana. Jason, Cavin, thank you both for joining us here this month. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, great to be here.
Well, let's just start. And why don't you give folks a quick kind of rundown of your respective operations? Cavin, I'll let you start. Give us a quick overview of your operation in Montana.
So I'm in southeastern Montana, along the Yellowstone River here. Irrigated dryland operation. We got about 2,060 acres of irrigated ground, mainly gravity irrigated from diversions out of the Yellowstone. And then about 4,430 acres of dryland. We raised quite a few different crops. We got 12 crops on the place: sugar beets, soybeans, millet seed, malt barley, alfalfa seed, yellow peas, spring wheat, sunflowers, lentils, kind of raise a little bit of everything. So I guess, got some crops that don't work very good on the dry land. We keep them strictly on the irrigated ground, but that's kind of what we got going on.
Sure. A wide range of different crops there in the Northern Plains. Well, and then we'll segue to Eastern Iowa. Jason, tell us a little bit about your operation.
Yeah, East Central Iowa. How do I follow that? That's a lot of crops. So we raise corn, soybeans, alfalfa, cereal rye, and usually we fool around with something different. This year we planted some camelina, and it does not like our humid climate, we found out. But we raise quite a few hogs. We custom feed for another farmer, about 30,000 fat hogs a year. And between that and we've got a few cattle, I do some custom spraying and custom farming, just, start to finish for some guys that just don't have the modern equipment, and they hire me to do it. So.
All right.
Yep.
Jason, I'll stay with you for a second. Weather conditions, how have things been for spring planting, and how have things been here as we get into July? I know folks, of course, have seen the video and the pictures from northwest of western Iowa and southern Minnesota and southeast South Dakota, all the flooding there. How have things been in east central Iowa?
Well, it was pretty good spring, I guess. Spring started in January for us this year, which is unusual. We had snow for about a week there, a little after Christmas, and then it melted and it got warm, and we got a lot of land improvement, liming, fertilizer done way ahead of time. Going into this April, we were about 50 inches short on rain for the last couple of years. We had a couple of really dry years on our farm. And then May tried to make up for a lot of that. We got about 8 inches of rain in May when we all wanted to plant. So that was a struggle, but it dried off and everything kind of greened up, and we got our potholes replanted, and we've just been trying to get everything sprayed up and ready for summer. But no, we could use quite a bit more rain. Everything looks fine now, but I think to get top yields, we're going to need a lot of rain this summer yet.
All right. How about in the Northern Plains? I know weather can always be interesting across the northern states. Cavin, how have things been for you this spring?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year. We didn't have a whole lot of a winter here either, but just kind of stayed wet enough to keep us out of the field later than normal. Typically, we get started seeding somewhere towards the middle of March on the cool seasons, the small grains, peas, stuff like that. And it was late March, like the last week of March before we got in, and kind of had some challenges. Seeding took a while. We didn't wrap up until probably the 10th of May by the time we got through everything. And it was just, one crop after the other. We had no breaks between the cool season and the warm seasons. Had some substantial rain in April and May. Cool weather. like 3 weeks ago, I looked on my weather station and our average temperature for 24 was still in the 30s.
Wow.
We're above that now, but we had frost on the 19th of June this year. So it's been a cool year. Been a challenge, but you know, the cool season crops, the winter wheat, you know, looks real good. Picked up some hail on some here last night, you know, and kind of had some spotty thunderstorms coming through. People get hit here, don't get hit there, but it's been interesting.
Well, let's talk about some issues, and I want to start with climate smart ag practices. That's such a hot topic right now. You think about a lot of the news surrounding trying to qualify for sustainable aviation fuel, for instance, and different feedstocks there, and all the various different climate smart conservation type practices. Cavin, if you want to start, what is your take on this climate smart initiatives, where things are at, how it applies to your operation, or what needs to be changed, tweaked, that kind of thing? I mean, what's your take on climate smart agriculture right now?
Well, I guess I'm a proponent of it. You know, I think we all need to try to do as much as we can with as little as possible, right? And through, you know, conservation practices, we save moisture, right? Moisture is a limiting factor in this part of the world. We're a semi-arid climate, so you know, like leaving more residue on the fields is always good. You know, we run stripper heads on, you know, shellborne stripper heads on any crops that we can. Just kind of try to catch as much snow, retain as much moisture as possible, you know, so it's not getting baked out by the sun when it's 110 degrees, you know, through July and August. You know, I guess one thing that we got going on in this area is we through Western Sugar, our sugar cooperative, we got a grant through the Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities to apply. Well, it's a freight reimbursement is what we got the money for, but we're applying high carbon char to fields. It's about 30% carbon and putting on 10 to 20 ton, you know, and that, you know, that's kind of a big deal. I'm a big believer in keeping and putting as much carbon as we can into the soils, because that's what we're all built on, right? That's what the plants are built out of, carbon-based life, right? So
Exactly. Jason, how about you? Your thoughts on some of these various climate smart ag practices?
Yeah, I'm like Cavin. I'm all on board with no-till, cover crops, careful nutrient management. All those things are they're better for your profitability and the environment. We in this area have a lot more rain than Cavin does on the average, but we were really dry last year, and some of the things we've been doing, they showed up. You know, the not tilling and keeping shade on the ground with armor from crop residue and cover crops, they really helped us a lot. But one thing I'm concerned about with the whole program, so to speak, is there's kind of a lack of clarity on what climate smart is. And I think that's something that we need to spend some time clarifying. I was talking to a gentleman that was doing carbon scoring for corn for ethanol and sustainable aviation fuel. And basically they said, if you no-till and cover crop, you're going to have a low carbon score. And I said, well, define the cover crop. Was it oats that were put out in November and they died a week later? Or is it cereal rye that was planted in October and grew through the winter and was terminated at planting time? There's a big difference there. I think there's a lot of room for improvement in the countryside, especially on the erosion side with wind and water erosion. Seems like it's continuing to be a problem. We had some dust storms and car accidents and stuff during planting time here. We had a 50-mile-per-hour wind one day in May, and let's just say that it was pretty nasty out. The dust was really a blowing. And so, yeah, as far as the conservation side, absolutely, I'm in favor of that. And anything we can do to prevent erosion is going to be great. So,
Cavin, to that point, Jason made about sustainable aviation fuel as well. There's been some talk from some folks that they're concerned that some of how this is being formed disqualifies farmers in certain regions, especially like the northern states. I mean, have you heard some of that from your neighbors that they're concerned about how these programs are being put together for SAF specifically?
I guess, there's I guess not a whole lot of talk about sustainable aviation fuel around our area.
Mhm.
The camelina thing, I know it's a crop that qualifies as a sustainable, uh, product or
biodiesel.
whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
biodiesel. That's one of them crops that's kind of been raised around here off and on, but it never seems to stick. I guess I'm not sure why. I've never been around it. Jason can maybe speak a little bit more to that, but just not a whole lot of talk, I guess, up in this part of the world about the biofuels. I mean, we don't really have any plants or anything like that in our area. The closest one is Richardson, North Dakota. That's 4.5, 5 hours away, probably. So we don't have a whole lot for that. We're more commodity growing region. Export to the coast. So.
Yeah, so the big thing I've noticed with camelina is that it really is pretty winter hardy. So for folks like yourself and me that we have a lot of cooler weather, it would be a great option for an oil seed other than canola to be growing because, like canola, you can't grow it canola on canola. It won't work. You've got to have something different out there because of rotation reasons, I guess you'd say, disease and fertility and timing and stuff. But the big reason that we grew it is it was a good option as a cover crop, so we could get something else growing along with our cereal rye we generally use. And so far, I'm liking what I see. We haven't had any negative effects with it, and it's great because the seeding rate is really low. There's 100,000 seeds per pound with camelina, so you can cover a lot of acres with not many pounds of seed. And the one thing I would like to talk about too on sustainable aviation fuel side is the carbon pipeline. So there's been a lot of talk about a CO2 pipeline tying the ethanol plants to a brine pool in Illinois or North Dakota, depending on where you're at. And they inject that CO2 into the brine under the ground, and it becomes limestone, calcium carbonate. And there's a lot of pushback from some local landowners on that project. And have you guys been read in on any of that? Or Jesse,
Yep.
You probably have. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have.
That seems like a prerequisite for us to get our corn into the sustainable aviation fuel market and just to get the carbon score down. But, I guess I'm okay with it, but there's a lot of other ways to use that CO2 other than just packing it in the ground. That seems like the most expensive way to process it or sequester it. And I know there's some talk of a methanol technology where they can take the CO2 and make fuel for ocean going vessels and clean those up and keep them from polluting. And I'm not really sure why the only way to do it is put it back in the ground. But
to your point there, I think even more broadly, we can open this up, and Cavin can probably jump in here too, just thinking about carbon credit programs and carbon capture, sequestration, things like that. It still feels like there's a lot of questions about how many of these programs work. It's kind of the Wild West in a way. Do you guys have any thoughts or any, frequent questions that you ask when people, are coming around talking about carbon capture programs from various companies, things like that?
yeah, I can speak to that. I was on Energy Policy Committee for American Farm Bureau for a while, and we were exposed to a lot of different companies and their models. And I still kind of say the same thing I did before. I would not sign any long-term agreement with anyone just because the nature the market is so in flux. We don't know what the rules are going to be. We think maybe if you sign a long-term agreement, you could just be giving up a lot of opportunity in the future. So me personally, no, I have not entered into any agreements. I do have a contract with Archer Daniels Midland for planting cover crop. They are just trying to reduce the carbon footprint of their grain shed, is the way they explain it. You hear of a watershed. Well, the area where their grain comes from, they'd like to see more cover crops planted. So I've been taking the cost share with their cover crop program.
Okay. Cavin, how about you? Anything with carbon capture up in the Northern Plains?
Yeah, I mean, there's discussion about it. I guess I don't know of anybody that I'm in contact with that signed any agreements. I kind of agree. It's one of those deals where there's really no definition to how they're gonna, I guess, log it, for lack of a better word for me right now. I feel like we need to have some sort of a standard set, and it needs to be something that's driven by the producers, can't be driven by the people that are wanting to buy these offsets and stuff like that. It seems like a lot of it is like what I've read on them. Like you do kind of end up getting, put in a corner almost, where you're required to do these practices for X amount of time, regardless. And I don't like having myself limited personally. I want to be able to pivot. If something's not working, I need to quit doing it, right? Because the least sustainable thing that I can do is quit farming, right? Go broke because I'm trying to fit somebody's model. That's not sustainable at all. So,
and to that point too, you mentioned the word standard, and I think I would agree that that's something that's missing from a lot of these programs, is just a set of standards. And I used the term earlier. It's kind of like the Wild West. It's everyone's got their own tilt to their program and things like that. And it feels like that even though there's been some farmer and rancher input, maybe there needs to be a little bit more to kind of craft some standards here.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was in a meeting, it was probably 5-6 years ago, and we were talking about climate smart agriculture. That's the first time I had heard that term. I can't exactly place where I was at, but I just said, well, what's climate smart agriculture? And the USDA person said, well, honestly, we're trying to have you guys define it by throwing money out in these grants. And that kind of bothered me. There's no metric, there's no set parameters as to what climate smart ag is. And a lot of money was spent on it. And that feels like there's a lot of opportunity for corruption and squandering tax dollars away, to me.
Cavin, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm with it. Throwing money at a deal is not going to get you anywhere. I guess through our co-op at Western Sugar, we're working with people that we sell our products to, and yes, we're not really getting any sort of financial benefit, but we are getting benefit in the market, right? There's consideration given to products, like our sugar that we produce and handle from start to beginning. That's that vertical integration makes it easier. But it needs to be something, I guess, that's more defined, is my overall opinion on it.
We are talking with Iowa farmer Jason Russell and Montana farmer Cavin Steiger here on our July Farmer Roundtable. Gentlemen, I want to talk Farm Bill with you here as we look to wrap up our discussion. And I look at the Farm Bill this way. We're on year 6 of a 5-year Farm Bill. There's a real possibility that we could be on year 7, as just feels like things are locked in a partisan stalemate right now on Capitol Hill. So What are your guys' perspectives on this farm bill debate? Why we can't get anything done? What you would like to see happen, et cetera, et cetera. I'll leave it a little open ended here. Jason, if you want to start, your thoughts on where this farm bill debate currently sits.
Well, I don't exactly know what we should do. I know there's a lot of talk about how the reference price needs to come up because of inflation, and I guess I would totally agree with that on commodities because the cost of everything we use to produce these commodities has doubled or quadrupled in some cases. And yeah, the reference price is way too low for a lot of things. And I think that's something important to address. Crop insurance, I think crop insurance is great. I think there's a lot of fraud in it because of the lack of oversight. I see a lot of people that do some sketchy things with crop insurance, and I'm not in the company, but I know when you see people doing certain things, you kind of wonder if that's really going on. I think they should maybe look at that a little bit and make the program maybe a little more efficient and bring costs down. There's land that's being farmed because you can get insurance for it, and it's likely never going to be anywhere near the county yield. Is that really the best way to go for the environment and the industry? Just a few bushels of corn every random acre like that is going to it's going to affect the markets, and it's going to do a lot of environmental harm. I wonder if that's always going the best way. And just in general, I think we need to have conservation be a priority too. With have the opportunity for the technical expertise and a little bit of cost share dollars. It goes a long way.
Cavin, your thoughts on the farm bill and where things stand currently?
Yeah, it's something that needs to get done, and it needs to get done soon. As far as like programs go and stuff like that, CSP is one that's utilized quite a bit up in this part of the world, and it works on a cycle with the farm bill, right? And so you have your contract period, and you have a maximum that you can receive in a farm bill. And I this last time my contract was up, I put in the paperwork to renew it. Had these additional practices that we were going to be working on the farm. Some of it was stuff that I was excited about. Still doing what came up, but I ended up not even putting my farm in on CSP because
it wasn't worth it.
It wasn't worth it. Yeah, I was going to get $17,000, out of CSP in the life of the contract, and so I'm like, it's not even worth signing up. So no. I didn't participate in the program as a result of it. I agree. Conservation needs to be a focus in the farm bill. EQIP is a program that has been wildly successful up here in the past, with development of irrigated ground from gravity irrigation to, overhead pivot irrigation. And putting sprinklers on this flood irrigated ground opens up so many more options, for things that we can do that you can't do when you have to run water across it, right? I've found ways to be able to no-till, but as far as like adding cover crops in to the rotation, after we get our small grains off, it's not practical in gravity irrigation because you have to re-put out all of the infrastructure, and it's a time suck, and with pivots, we can go out there after the small grains come off, drag the air seeder across, put a cover crop in, and keep that living growing out there through, fall freeze up. It's just, there needs to be the funding there in order for these practices to get put in place.
It feels to me, and this could maybe be where we wrap up our discussion here and talking farm bill, that this round of Farm Bill debate has been probably the most partisan that I think we've ever seen, and maybe that speaks to the broader political climate. I mean, we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. We'll talk for another hour about presidential politics and things like that. But it just feels like that a lot of this chatter is it's going to be after the elections as Farm Bill gets done. So I mean, if elected officials are listening into the show or anything like that, I mean, what would you guys say to them in terms of, sitting down, figuring this thing out because it needs to get done?
Well, I guess I really believe that the political environment is way too polarized. I mean, nobody wants to look at what we have in common. We all have common goals. We all have common interests, but we just want to look at the things that we don't agree on, and if they could start looking at the things that we all agree on, the things that we all think are proper and need to get done, things would move a lot further. I guess a point that I'd like to make is I'm concerned about the future of agriculture in America, the way that we're going with regulations. It's overdone. Like we don't need to be regulated to death, and it's making it more challenging to be a farmer in America, and it's making it less appealing for new farmers to come in. I look around our area. I'm 40 years old and I'm still the young guy. I mean, it's getting older and older, and we need to do something to make it more appealing for young people to want to come back and be on the farm and produce the food that we need in this country. So,
Jason?
Yeah. I'm kind of frustrated watching the Farm Bill debate. It feels like a hostage situation. They're like, it goes from SNAP back to reference prices and back and forth, and it's just a standoff. They aren't doing what I call good faith bargaining and dealing. They're just trying to hold each other hostage. And it's kind of what our culture has been this last administration. You look at the amount of legislation they got through that actually did anything, and that's just been the nature of the Congress all along. It's a bad deal all around. We need to grow up and get over it.
I think that's a good way to wrap up this discussion. Jason, Cavin, this has been great. Thank you both for the time and joining us here on the July Farmer Roundtable. And we'll wish you the best of luck throughout the rest of the growing season this year and beyond. And we'll have to get you both back on the show again soon and have another conversation. Thanks so much, and have a great weekend. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, Jesse.